Hey guys, and welcome back to my channel for another midweek mystery, where today I'm going to be talking about the sad case of Wilma June Nissen. I was actually contacted by Wilma's daughter Chrissy, who sadly was never able to meet her mother, but she's desperate to finally get justice for her 43 years after her body was found. In a twist, it does seem like investigators have a very strong suspect in Wilma's murder. They just can't find her, hence this video. Wilma Nissen was born on the 18th of October 1954 in San Francisco, California, to Charles Nissen and June Simmons Bradford. It seems the two weren't together for very long. June would go on to marry several times, having the last names of Cummings, Anderson and Long over the years before she died in 2003 in Utah. Charles died in 1986. It seems like Wilma had a very hard childhood. When she was just 8 years old, her mother abandoned her and her sister Mona, who was disabled and unable to speak or hear. So the girls were left in the custody of their father, who neglected them. They didn't attend school and would be locked inside a bedroom closet all day whilst he worked. By the time Wilma was 10, she was unable to read, write and even eat with a fork. Eventually Charles lost his job and the neglect only got worse from there. The family were forced to move into a car, Wilma would literally walk the streets looking for food, and Mona would be locked in the boot of the car all day, every day. It was the kind of childhood that you wouldn't wish on anyone. Wilma's short life was tragic, beginning to end. Finally, in 1964, the sisters were removed from Charles's care and placed in foster care, where Wilma would live with both families and in a number of facilities. She lived with Marshall and Maxine Holt in Anaheim, California from 1964 to 66. In 1967, she lived with Vincent and Alice Haas, or Haas, sorry if I'm pronouncing that wrong, in Seal Beach, California, and would stay with them for many years. Eventually, when she aged out of the foster system, Wilma would start to hitchhike from place to place and eventually turn to sex work as a means to survive. Around this time, she gained the nickname of Boobs. In 1973, she married a man called Donald Wellington and lived with him in the Hollywood area. The next year, she had a son in San Diego who she named Michael Pizarro Jr. Donald was clearly not the father. But later that same year, she gave birth to Donald Wellington Jr. By October 1975, Wilma was living with a man called Robert Irvin, who she lived with in Bellflower, California, and they married in June 1977. A couple of months later, they had Crystal Irvin, Chrissy, who contacted me to do this video. She was adopted by Vincent and Alice, Wilma's final foster parents, shortly after her birth, and she's not too sure what happened to the two boys Wilma had before her brothers. Early in 1978, Wilma left San Diego, where she'd been living in a camper on the street with a man called Charles Inman Belt, and she went to live with him in Atlanta, Georgia with Charles's parents. Charles said that one day Wilma just left their home and he never saw her again. He just assumed that she'd gone back to San Diego. Over the years, it's believed that Wilma used the married names of Wilma Wellington and Wilma Irvin, but also used other aliases including Amy Irvin, Amy Belt, Wilma Belt, or Amy Nissen. On October 4th, 1978, Wilma's body was discovered southwest of the West Lyon School in Lyon County, Iowa. She was just 23 years old. A telephone company employee found her body down a narrow gravel road down past open crop fields whilst laying cable. She was found in a ditch, face down and hidden in the tall grass. She was found wearing white go-go boots, green and khaki trousers, bikini underwear and a silver and gold ring on the ring finger of her right hand. She was naked from the waist up. Severely decomposed, her lower jaw and all but 2 teeth were missing, making her face unrecognisable. It was speculated that she may have been in the ditch for up to 120 days before she was finally discovered. Her feet were found tied together with a braided hemp rope. Despite investigators scouring the area for any other evidence, they found nothing. But based on the position of Wilma's body, they believe that the rope was used to pull her into the ditch from a nearby area or a vehicle. She definitely hadn't died in the ditch. She had died elsewhere and been dumped there. The fact that her body had been dragged face down was pretty solid evidence of this. Her autopsy report showed a dislocated right elbow and the potential of a dislocation of a cervical vertebra, which could have happened after her death or may have been the result of a struggle with her killer. It's also suspected that she may have been sexually assaulted, as her underwear was found wrapped around her left leg. Importantly, she had no ID on her. Wilma will be known only as Jane Doe for nearly 3 decades. Her gravestone at Riverview Cemetery in Rock Rapids was marked as unidentified woman. A man called Blythe Blumendahl was elected sheriff in 2001, and he vowed never to close Wilma's case until it was solved. It really seemed to strike a chord with him. At this time, Wilma was still an unidentified Jane Doe 20 years on. Despite many efforts to identify her over the previous years, including a facial reconstruction completed in May 1998, they didn't know if they would ever know her real name. That is until 2006, when a lab tech finally matched Jane Doe's fingerprints to a fingerprint card from Los Angeles, to that of a Wilma June Nissen. From then, Blumendahl spent a lot of time trying to piece together this woman's life. Who was she before she was a murder victim? He submitted information about her murder to VICAP, who collect and analyse information about violent crimes for similarities. But because they didn't have a cause of death for Wilma due to how decayed she was, it was very difficult to narrow potential suspects. He also shared details of her case with an FBI profiler who worked to identify possible characteristics of the killer. And he requested that the FBI lab in Quantico conducted DNA testing on the clothes and rope found at the scene, even though Blumendahl acknowledged there was actually very little chance of finding anything helpful. He just wanted to do anything he could. On the 18th September 2007, it was announced that Wilma's body was to be exhumed in an attempt to find any extra clues and hopefully lead to the capture of her killer. Only as they brought her coffin up, they realised that water had filled it in the years underground, and there were just some of her bones floating inside. The pathologist took samples of this water before it was siphoned out. Wilma's remains were originally sent to the Iowa DCI Criminalistics Lab, where forensic anthropologist Dawnie Stedman was initially unable to determine a cause of death. However, after the remains were taken to New York and then to Salt Lake City, where they were studied by another scientist, their findings all came together to finally determine a cause of death in this case. The Lyon Chief Deputy Jerry Berkey said to the Lyon County Reporter, "Exhuming the body allowed us to develop the cause of death, but we are not releasing that information. It's important to have a cause of death if we were to ever arrest someone, because we would have to prove that she didn't die of natural causes. So now we can prove what killed her." They've never released the cause of death to the public, although it was apparently very vicious and in a definite manner. Only the killer and the police know the details. There was a pretty big development in the case in August 2009 with the arrest of an 82-year-old man called John Van Gameren. He was charged with 6 counts of perjury when it was found that he'd lied to investigators about transporting strippers and sex workers from Sioux Falls to his home, which was not far from where Wilma's body was found. When directly questioned, John lied under oath about this former statement and about knowing a woman called Annette Jacobson, which is according to documents filed in Lyon County District Court, amongst other things. I'm very curious about the woman mentioned here, Annette Jacobson. I'm not sure what relevance, if any, she has to Wilma's case, and I couldn't really find any more information on her at all, and Chrissy also didn't know any more about her. But then, in February 2010, all charges against John Van Gameren were dismissed. At the time of this, investigators were still trying to connect Wilma to Iowa. She was from California and had no known connections to this particular area. Blumendahl started to work under the assumption that Wilma got involved with an escort service, likely in Sioux Falls, an assumption which was later confirmed. Had Van Gameren transported Wilma to a party in Iowa and this is how she ended up murdered? Is that how those leads seem to connect? It seems investigators just plugged away at this theory for many years, hoping that one day they might be able to talk to the person who would be able to give them the information that they needed. It was well known that many parties took place in Western Lyon County around the time that Wilma went missing, parties filled with sex workers, hence Van Gameron's 2009 arrest. They tried to talk to people in the area about these parties, but as you can guess, the people who were in attendance got very defensive. From what I can gather from a couple of comments on the internet, this particular area of Iowa is pretty conservative. It was then and it still is. Nobody would want to admit to attending parties full of sex workers. Even the sex workers who may have been in attendance at these parties weren't interested in talking to the police, for probably understandable reasons. Sex workers and police are not known to have the best relationship. Because of these roadblocks, in 2016 the Sheriff's Department made the decision to release a photo of a woman who they wanted to speak to in connection with Wilma's death, a suspect. Lyon County Chief Deputy and Detective Jerry Berkey said that they know that Wilma worked for an escort service called Playgirls or Playmates out of Sioux Falls that often service parties in Lyon County. Wilma often worked alongside a black female who went by the name of Sugar during the summer of 1978, which is when she died. Despite questioning multiple people over the years, they never got anyone to admit to seeing Sugar with Wilma at a party. Investigators, it seems, do know Sugar's real name, but they're not releasing it publicly because they're waiting for somebody to come forward and hopefully independently identify her. Sugar was known for robbing other sex workers, and they think that this may have been the motive behind Wilma's murder. She wanted to steal the money that Wilma had earned that night. I'm sure there's more of a reason why they're following this theory. They probably have more than they've let known publicly. Shortly after the murder, Sugar fled to Canada but soon stabbed someone there, so had to flee back to the United States. So this was clearly quite a violent woman. The Sheriff's Department say that they're confident they know where and how Wilma was killed at one of the Lyon County parties, and then her body was dumped many miles away. But they don't think Sugar acted alone, and they've been trying to identify another sex worker who went by the name of Peaches. Although it doesn't seem that we have a photo of Peaches to share here, and they have confirmed that they don't actually know her name at all, she was said to have been a light-skinned black woman from Canada who worked in Sioux Falls and Yankton, South Dakota during the 1970s and 1980s as, I'm assuming, a sex worker. They're pretty certain that once they're able to identify these two women, they're probably going to be able to solve this case. There's a $10,000 reward offered for any information leading to an arrest and conviction of the person or persons responsible for Wilma's death. I'll leave the number for the Anonymous Hotline in the description box down below, and if you or anyone you know has lived around any of the areas I've mentioned in this video, Lyon County, Sioux Falls and Yankton, around 1978, please share this video with them or share this information with them. Someone must recognise the woman in this photo and be able to help bring Wilma's killer to justice. Chrissy never got to meet her mum and doesn't want to give up on finding her killer. Wilma had a very tragic life. It was never easy from day one, and she deserves justice. All too often, sheriff's departments tend to give up on cold cases such as this one, but I must say it's pretty incredible how determined the Lyon County Sheriff's Office are to solve this one. Sheriff Bloemendahl retired many years ago, but the current sheriff, Sheriff Stuart Vanderstop, and his team are still just as eager to get this case solved. So credit where credit's due. You can't say they've ever slacked on this case, and they very easily could have let Wilma remain unidentified, but they didn't, and now they're so close. They just want the final pieces of the puzzle to fit together. Thank you so much for watching this video. Like I said a moment ago, if you or anyone you know might have information pertaining to this case or lived in the area, then please just pay extra attention, share this information with people you know, and they just need to get hold of this woman. They need to find out who she is, where she's living, and they might finally be able to get justice for Wilma. And a huge thank you to Chrissy as well for contacting me and trusting me to tell her mother's story. It is not a responsibility that I take lightly at all, and it always means so much when people trust me to tell their loved one's story, so I really hope that I always do it justice. Hopefully we can help make a difference in this case. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye guys.